Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to the Red and Bold Show. I am one of your hosts, Marc Adams. You can find me at 49ers Camelot, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anthony Robertson, who you can find at 49ers Cutback. We're pumped and ready to eat some turkey and all of that kind of stuff. I am. You are too, right, Ant?
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving. It's one of my favorites because of football connected with good food. Uh, Always a good recipe. It's a good day. You get the family together and everyone just kind of enjoys it. And you know what? I am looking forward to the 49ers not playing either. The 49ers played last year,
Yeah.
and it just changes the mindset, right? It's just a more relaxing day when they're not playing. So I enjoy the 49ers not playing on holidays, and I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. Then we'll watch the Cowboys, Detroit, all that stuff, the normals, and you always root for the Cowboys. I always root for the Cowboys to lose, so I don't really care who they're playing. I always want them to lose.
I always root for the Cowboys to lose. Now, if they were playing the Seahawks, man, I don't know, because I hate both of those teams, and I hate the Rams. But hey, anytime the Cowboys lose, I'm happy. So I was not happy to see them win this past weekend. But we don't care about the Cowboys, so we're not going to spend too much time on them. Here today, it looks like Fred Warner is dealing with what was it, week 4, I think, against the Patriots. He said that he fractured his ankle or foot or something like that. I think I saw. Did you
Yeah,
see
it's his
that?
ankle. Yeah, we had thought it was a probably like a sprain. That was the thought process, is that it was some sort of a high ankle sprain or something like that, and he was working through it. And now we find out that it actually has been playing through a fracture. That's just that toughness that comes from Fred Warner, but it's also an explanation of why he hasn't been playing that defensive play, all pro defensive player of the year type football over the last several weeks, is because he's had to kind of step back from that. In fact, it makes it even more impressive that he's still playing as well as he is with the injured wheel. So, yeah, it's crazy that he's doing that, but he put the team, ahead of himself in this situation. That's that mental toughness. That's crazy. I didn't expect to hear that from Fred Warner, but I have a lot of respect for what he's doing and him being out there on the field for his football team.
Yeah, that's crazy that he's able to do that. Pretty impressive. And so again, Brock Purdy not throwing today. Looks like he did throw once, according to Nick Wagner. He threw one screen pass, but other than that, did not throw at practice today. How does that make you feel? Are you concerned? Do you think, it's probably just one of those things, he'll be good to go, or do you think that he could miss this game as well?
Well, I think it's always nervous because of the way things went down last week, where they felt like he was going to be able to play and that they were just going to kind of rest him until Thursday. And then Thursday came and he threw, and there was more pain than he had originally on Monday. That's never a good sign. Now, the good news is he did throw on Monday. They said it was pain free. And so Kyle Shanahan kind of alluded to the fact that he probably would stick to the same plan he had last week, which meant last week on Wednesday, Brock Purdy didn't throw. So tomorrow is actually going to be the big day when he throws on Thursday. If he throws and there's no pain, there's a likelihood he's going to play on Sunday versus Buffalo. If he throws and we have a similar situation, unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be Brandon Allen, because Kyle Shanahan has also said that if Brock Purdy can't go, it's going to be Brandon Allen. And so the 49ers, I think, are very hopeful it's going to be Brock Purdy. And I think all the fans definitely are very hopeful it's going to be Brock Purdy, because it's a different team when he's at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and we'll get more into Brandon Allen and the other players here in a second. Vince is in the chat, says so many injuries. Hopefully Dre and Hufanga coming back soon. Dre Greenlaw had his practice window opened up on Monday. So it's possible that they have 3 weeks to decide what to do with him, either add him to the active roster or shut him down for the season like they did John Feliciano this week. I haven't heard anything on Hufanga. Have you heard anything lately?
No, I haven't. And that was one of the things that was the talk, probably like a month ago, that he was going to potentially come back and play with the cast. His agent was pushing for that. But Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were kind of more pessimistic about it. They didn't know how he was going to feel. So that one's been up in the air, but I thought he was going to end up coming back, just the kind of warrior mentality that he has. So yeah, I haven't heard anything, which means with them adding Tashawn Gibson back, there might not be an opportunity for them to bring back Talanoa Hufanga. So I was hoping he was going to come back, but right now it doesn't appear, because they could have easily opened his practice window already and he could have been capable of going. Now we're getting close to the point where you can open up the practice window for anyone that's going to be playing at the end of the season. Once you get to that 4, basically 21 days away from the end of the season, you just open it up for everybody, and then you make decisions, because you have 2 playoff, IR positions to bring back, so it kind of gives you more. But 49ers making the playoffs is going to be very difficult at this point.
Well, let's get to talking about players that we think will play on Sunday. I'm going to give you 4 players that I really been liking what I've been seeing lately, and 4 players that right now I'm mad at. And I want you to tell me what you think, like if I'm wrong about any, or what you what you're seeing on film from these guys. So here's the 4 players that I'm really happy with right now. George Kittle is obviously, to me, he's probably the best tight end in football, and definitely is the 49ers best receiver right now. I mean, you have Juwan Jennings doing great things, but really like what Kittle's doing. He made 2 great catches on Sunday. The second one is Juwan Jennings, just doing the things that he does. Deommodore Lenoir is the third, and Malik Mustafa is the fourth. He hits anything that moves. And so I really like what I'm seeing from all 4 of those. Where are you at on each one?
Yeah, I think George Kittle is the best player right now for the 49ers on offense. And he's just been so significant. And I think that, his loss was felt in the Seattle game. If George Kittle would have been playing that game, I do think it would have been a different outcome. He's just been that impactful. His red zone play has been huge. He's been making touchdowns in the red zone. And he's just a dynamic player, whether he's catching the football or he's blocking. There's very few mistakes. He makes mistakes, but they're very few compared to others. And that consistency is a model that the 49ers definitely need. So Kittle is a huge-time player, a big-time player for this football team. They need him. And anytime he's on the field, they need to look for him. There were plenty of opportunities where Brandon Allen could have went to George Kittle even more last week, and he didn't, because Kittle finds ways to get open. And then you talked about Malik Mustafa, and Mustafa, to me, has far surpassed Jair Brown now. Malik Mustafa is the best safety that's playing for the 49ers right now, and Jair Brown is a distant second. And so I do think that, if they make a decision to go a different way at safety next year with one of those guys, it's going to be replacing Jair Brown, because Malik Mustafa is an absolute guided missile. The guy flies around. There are a couple of things he needs to clean up. Some of his angles are bad. Sometimes he doesn't chill and set his feet and break down like he's supposed to make tackles. But those are things you're going to work on as a young player. I like what I see from Malik Mustafa, and I think he's going to be a beast in the future. So I'm excited about him at the safety position.
Yeah, really like what I'm seeing. Here are 4 players that I'm mad at right now. You can tell me if I'm overreacting or whatever. The first is Deebo Samuel. Does he look slow to you? To me, he looks slow. He's not breaking tackles like he has in the past. Something just doesn't seem right with him.
Well, it's funny. One of my friends, Warren, he says that Deebo needs to put that 19 back on. He thinks that's the problem. I think that, I think with Deebo, I think that there are moments he looks fast. I think you look at that kickoff return, he looked pretty quick on that one. He was moving pretty well. There's been a couple other occasions this year where he's looked fast. I think he's still moving good, but you're right. At times it does look like he's maybe laboring a little bit. I don't know if he's dealing with something. I don't know if he's got some sort of an ailment that we don't know about. But yeah, I mean, Deebo hasn't looked as dynamic, but I also don't think the 49ers have gotten him the football as much as they'd like in certain situations. So I don't think that Deebo has looked as impressive as I thought he was going to look, because his training camp was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was so good, but we haven't seen that translate to the regular season. Maybe that's some because of Brandon Ayuk, the loss of Christian McCaffrey early in the season. Maybe those hurt some opportunities for Debo.
The second one that I'm mad at is Devondre Campbell. And maybe it's not his fault that they keep putting him in situations where he can't shine. But you talk about bad angles with Jair Brown. To me, I don't know if Campbell takes bad angles or if he's just slow. But he misses too many plays. I think I heard this morning, I don't remember who said it, that I think he leads the team in missed tackles on this season. So he's another one that I'm just kind of over and hoping that Greenlaw can come back soon and keep Campbell off the field some.
Yeah, I think Devondre Campbell struggled some, especially in the early part of this season. I actually thought he hit his stride, kind of that Tampa Bay stretch when they came out of the bye. I think Dallas, Tampa Bay, he looked pretty good. He had some really good games. Last week was not the best game for Devondre Campbell. But I thought that Kyle Shanahan had actually said something a few weeks ago that he felt like Devondre Campbell had finally gotten comfortable with the defense. I think that was a little bit of the problem early on. They do put him in some tough situations. I've been talking about this on my show all week. Is I don't understand why when the 49ers are in 3rd and long, like 3rd and 10 plus, that Devondre Campbell's still on the field. I don't get it. You have a third safety like Deshaun Gibson you could bring on the field. You could bring one of those extra corners. I don't understand why the 49ers don't go to a dime set in those sort of situations. Get a more athletic guy that can go out there and play. I don't get it. So there are some question marks as far as personnel groupings that I have for Nick Sorensen, especially what happened last week. And I think Devondre Campbell gets caught up in that. So you're right. Sometimes they put him in bad situations, and his athleticism's not what it was 2 or 3 years ago when he was an All-Pro. That is definitely for sure. And so Drake Greenlaw would be a huge upgrade. I think we all know that. But I didn't think Campbell played bad Tampa Bay and maybe the weeks after. But Green Bay, it wasn't his best performance.
My next one is Eric Saubert. I feel like he's always doing things that are wrong. Now, the kickoff return by Deebo Samuel that was brought back because of a holding penalty called on Saubert, I've heard some people say definitely was a hold, but by and large, most people are saying that was not a hold.
I want to know who these people are that think that was a hold. That is absolutely perfect technique for blocking. The hands on the inside on the chest plate. That's exactly how you coach it and teach it. That's what we call a pancake block. That is very good block. There was nothing wrong with that. All you got was a defender who was out of place, reaching out with an arm, and a referee that bailed him out. That was a perfect block from Eric Saubert. If I'm a coach, I walk by Eric Saubert and I tell him, don't change anything. Do that every single time. That was a bad call. And I think, you're right. He gets caught up because he has made a lot of mistakes this season. It hasn't been great play from Eric Saubert. But I've thought from the beginning of the offseason that Saubert needed to be tight end 3. I've been saying that from the very beginning. A lot of people said from what he did at training camp, he deserved to be tight end 2. And the truth is he was better than the other guys. But they still have a hole at tight end. I was hoping for Logan Thomas, somebody else to step up and play that position. Maybe one of the young rooks. That didn't develop. So the 49ers definitely have a hole at tight end 2 again. Saubert as tight end 3, we wouldn't be talking about this. This would be fine. He's an upgrade over Ross Dwelley, but he's not an upgrade over Charlie Warner. Warner was so good blocking. Saubert's not even close to being as good as Charlie Warner, and I think we feel the effects of that sometime. But, yeah, that kickoff return was a huge momentum change in that football game, and the referees completely messed that one up. In no world, that's a holding. And if someone says that is holding, I want them to define holding. That means that everyone holds on every single play.
Well, Larry Krueger was one of them. I heard him a day or two ago say, and he was kind of pushed on it, asking what about that was a hold, and he said that he had 2 fistfuls of jersey. I don't remember seeing that, but I also don't go back and watch the film like you do, so that's why I was waiting to see what you thought. But what I saw on replays did not look to me like he did anything wrong.
Well, fistful of jersey is not holding when you're on the inside, as long as the chest plate. Everyone grabs and everyone grabs jersey. That's why they get that jersey as tight as they can to prevent that. But when you grab that chest plate, the jersey naturally indents, so it looks like you got jersey. But everyone knows that that's legal. If you get your hands outside the chest plate and grab jersey, that is a hold, 100%. But that was not what happened. It was a great block, and that's just a frustrating play. But if you looked at the game overall, the referees actually called a lot of special teams penalties in that game. That was a focus and a point of emphasis. And it's almost like we think there's going to be a penalty, so we're going to go ahead and call it if we see something that's close. And that's a little frustrating. I argue consistency with referees is one of the worst things in the NFL. One crew to the next, you don't know what you're going to get. 1 week, there's no holding at all. Either way, it's not like it's a benefit to the 49ers or something bad, but you just don't know. The next week, there's an emphasis on holding. So these guys don't know what I can do and what I can't do, and I think that's really frustrating in the league.
My last player that I'm mad at right now, you have to know where I'm going with this one.
Jake Brendel.
Brendel.
You have every right to be mad at Jake Brendel. So the last 2 weeks have been very rough for Jake Brendel. This week was his worst game. And Jake Brendel, I try to keep it real clear with him. Like, he has good plays and bad plays, and I've tried to illustrate that in my film breakdowns that I do on Patreon. But this one was one of those times where it was hard for me because I never want to tear down a player like this much.
Sure.
But you have to call it out what it is. And this was by far his worst game this season and maybe of his career. He got put on his backside in pass blocking, got put on his backside in run blocking. He was getting handled when it came to second level blocks. Jake Brendel is a 305, 310-pound offensive lineman, and Quay Walker was pushing him around at the second level and getting through. There should have been a whole shot, Christian McCaffrey, big-time explosive run. Everyone else did their job, and Quay Walker ran right through Jake Brendel, and he made the tackle. Those types of things are just absolutely frustrating for a 49ers offense, and the run blocking has suffered, and it's not just Jake Brendel, but that interior part of the offensive line. Dominic Puni has a couple here or there. You expect it. He's a rookie. He's going to get better at those things. But Aaron Banks and Jake Brendel have struggled. And I think Banks is just moving a little bit slower right now. I know he's been dealing with a calf, now a concussion. So that has been part of his problem. You see there's no flexibility in the lower half of his body. And with Jake Brendel, it's bad positioning. He doesn't get his body in the right spots. His legs don't move with the upper part of his body, and he gets handled. It's not good right now. So the 49ers got a real problem there, and I don't know what this means for this week. We know Jake Brendel is going to start, but there's a chance that that Banks doesn't make it out of concussion protocol, and they went with Ben Bartch last week. You might have Bartch there. Dominic Puni's day-to-day with a shoulder. It looks like he's going to play, but if not, you could have Burford playing at the right guard spot. So 49ers interior offensive line is a focus and a worry going against Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and a very impressive Buffalo Bills interior defensive line.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun. I know that the offensive line wasn't good on Sunday. Brendel wasn't good. Banks wasn't good. I don't remember much about McKivitz and Jalen Moore being bad. Dominic Puni, that was his worst game, I think. But did the tackles play okay when you went back and watched?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much one of those things I say. If you don't hear a offensive lineman's name or you don't have to bring him up, they did a pretty good job. There was a couple plays from McKivitz, a couple more. I wanted more from Jalen Moore, but for the most part, pretty clean games for both of those guys. And I thought that Jalen Moore actually did a good job in place of Trent Williams. Was it Trent Williams? You're not going to get that caliber of movement when it comes to the run game and just the fact that he's going to handle the left tackle spot. But as a guy stepping in place of a all-pro caliber player, I thought Jalen Moore did himself a good thing and did a good job. So, yeah, I was pretty impressed with the offensive tackles compared to the interior offensive line, where I think there's a real problem.
Well, let's switch to the quarterback. How do you think Brandon Allen played when you went back and watched the film? And would Joshua Dobbs have been a better choice, especially since Brandon Allen barely has two hands right now?
Yeah, that was interesting that Brandon Allen had the broken finger. That luckily it wasn't on the throwing hand, but it was on the other hand. It can make it tough to deal with the football. A slick football sometimes can be a problem. I thought Brandon Allen, the things I expected him to excel at were going to be coming to the line of scrimmage and understanding what play calls to get into, looking at the coverage and being able to understand which side of the field to attack with his progressions and the play call. And I didn't see that very much. I thought we saw some misses from Brandon Allen where he would attack the 2 receiver side when he should have attacked the 3 receiver side and would have guys open on that side. So those were the things I thought he would be maybe ahead of Josh Dobbs on, and I didn't think he was. And then I thought execution-wise, even though there was a couple really good throws, that back shoulder throw to George Kittle was phenomenal. Other than that, he was a little bit behind. He, missed Chris Conley on the deep vertical play that would have been a huge explosive. He just threw it right up the seam and not lead him out in front away from defense. I didn't think it was a great performance from him. And the thing about him compared to Josh Dobbs is he's just a stationary target. He moves nowhere. He's stuck in the pocket where Dobbs can extend plays. He can create opportunities. That's one thing I like about Dobbs compared to Brandon Allen. And I've been a Josh Dobbs guy since training camp. I thought Dobbs outplayed Brandon Allen in training camp and in preseason. And I understood Kyle going with Brandon Allen early because I thought maybe he just felt like Brandon Allen had a more firm grasp on the offense and that eventually they would go to Dobbs, but he stuck with Allen. I thought in this game there was a perfect opportunity to go to Josh Dobbs late in the fourth quarter and see what he could have done in this offense. Kyle didn't do that, but I do think that they should go to Josh Dobbs. And if it's Brandon Allen starting this game, I hope it's a quick pull. They don't have time to waste. If you go through a first quarter and Brandon Allen's not playing well, get him out, get Dobbs in, and let the guy use his athletic ability to help your offensive line, or you're just going to be a sitting duck back there.
Tommy Huxley's in the chat, and he's not happy that the 49ers have not told us about Fred Warner's injuries so far. Yeah, and that's you've talked about this earlier that says a lot about Fred Warner playing, but to me, there has to be some concern about making that injury worse as the season goes on.
Well, I think that's the conversation I'm sure that Fred Warner had with the trainers, Fred Warner had with the doctors. Hey, what is the injury going to do if I keep playing on it? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to be the same? Is this something that, it's going to heal even while I'm playing? Like, what exactly is going on with a fracture? Because it's not uncommon to hear someone say they played through fracture. Usually not this long of the season. Usually it's maybe like, oh, we're going to the playoffs. We're going to play through fracture, playoff, Super Bowl, whatever that is. So it's not uncommon. And fracture can mean a lot of different things. We don't know the severity of the fracture. We don't know where it's located. All those things will play into whether Fred Warner, should play through it or not. I know the first thought for everyone is, hey, it's fractured. Don't go play. But that's not a football mentality. That football mentality, Warrior mentality is, oh, can I cast it? Okay. Can I play through it? What can I do for the pain? Is it going to get worse? If it's not, I might as well go out there and play. And I think that's what Fred's doing here. It's a decision that a lot of people wouldn't make. A lot of people would sit out and they would get better. And Fred Warner wasn't willing to do that. So we'll see what happens. But I think everyone can basically say, one way or the other. Some people feel he shouldn't have played. Some people, like me, understand that attitude and they just go out and play. But at some point, you wonder what Fred is thinking.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if they lose to Buffalo, which they probably will they shut him down for the season? Maybe they'll wait till they're mathematically eliminated. But even if they are not yet mathematically eliminated, if they lose this game to Buffalo, their chances are really slim, even though they're still just a game out. But to me, this does not look like a team that's about to make a playoff run. I mean, there's just no fire out there, other than a few players like Lenore and Kittle and Jennings. You take away guys like that, Mustafa and Warner as well, even though he hasn't played as well lately, but we understand why. That fire just isn't there. And I think that it's just because they're exhausted. They're physically exhausted. They're mentally exhausted. It just doesn't seem to be a vibeful atmosphere right now.
Yeah, I think the NFC West, the way it's kind of playing out, is preventing the 49ers from scaling back and deciding to, not bring some guys back because they're kind of in limbo right now. Do we still play and try to make the playoffs? because everyone knows if you get into the dance, you just never know. You get a matchup that works your way, you win a game, all of a sudden you get hot, you become the Giants that won a couple Super Bowls in like 2011. And so you always wonder if you could recapture that magic just enough. And that's where the 49ers are right now. 18% chance of making the playoffs doesn't seem like a lot, but one or two things go the right way, and all of a sudden it's like 40% or 50%. And so I think the Arizona Cardinals losing to Seattle has put the 49ers in that state of limbo. And so right now, I don't think any changes happen, but this week could go to determine a long way of what the 49ers do in the future. But like Kyle said, we still have games against the Rams. We have game against the Cardinals. They have some winnable games coming up, and those are big ones. We'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be tough for the 49ers to make the playoffs. But hey, I don't want to call it a done deal because, like you said, they're not mathematically out, and until they are, you just never know what can happen.
Yeah. The 49ers here lately have not been running the ball very well, especially since Christian McCaffrey has returned, which is strange to say. Is it the offensive line? Is it McCaffrey? Or are defenses just figuring out how to play this offense better?
It is a lot to do with the offensive line. It's a lot to do with edge blockers as well. Guys like Eric Staubert, Kyle Juszczyk on occasion, they haven't really made great blocks on the edge consistently. And then it's also sometimes Christian McCaffrey, sometimes Jordan Mason. I know Mason's ran really well, but I think that it's kind of everything. Now, I do think defenses have decided that they're no longer going to let this 49ers offense just run the football consistently. They are going to come up and take away the run game and put the onus on the quarterback, Brock Purdy or Brandon Allen, to beat them. So I think that has been a point of emphasis for these offenses or defenses. Now, what's interesting, Seattle ran a too high safety look the whole time, where Tampa Bay, Green Bay were more aggressive in stopping the 49ers run game and making it really hard. There weren't a lot of areas for McCaffrey to run, but if we would add some good blocking from Jake Brendel, if we'd add some good blocking from Aaron Banks on occasion, a couple on the edge, there were opportunities again for explosive plays. This is something I've been saying. Against Seattle, there was 10. Against Tampa Bay, there was 4 or 5 big runs that could have had. Jordan Mason missed an opportunity in this game. I know he had an explosive run for over 10. That play could have went for 40. Just the way he ran the ball when he got past that first level was not good. His second level vision hasn't been great this season. And I think that's sometimes what the 49ers see. What I will say about Kyle, he adjusted in the second half and got a decent run game going with Christian McCaffrey in the third quarter. And that opened up some play action plays. But yes, defenses are trying to take away the run game and putting the onus on the 49ers throwing the football. And last week, especially with Brandon Allen at quarterback, why wouldn't you load the box with 8 or 9 guys and make Brandon Allen go beat you? He wasn't able to do it. And I think if Brandon Allen's at quarterback, that's exactly what the Buffalo Bills will do this week.
The last 2 weeks, Ricky Pearsall has been shut out. I don't even know if they've thrown the ball his way. Is he not getting open, or the quarterback's just not looking his direction?
He's open. They're not looking his direction. And I think with this week especially, Brandon Allen missed a lot of open wide receivers. It wasn't just Ricky Pearsall, but there were opportunities for Pearsall to catch the ball, and we just didn't get targeted. And it's tough when you see guys out there wide open. And I know sometimes it happens on the backside of progression, and that's not the best way to look. I ignore those. But when Brandon Allen goes the wrong way on the progression, he looks to the wrong side of the field and takes advantage of the wrong things. That frustrates me. He did have Pearsall for a couple of plays, and there were other plays that he could have had Kittle and others. So I think that the Packers game especially can be attributed to the quarterback. Kyle Shanahan was scheming it up to give him some very easy defined reads and defined throws. And you saw it happen on that third drive. He was taking what was there and it was working really well. And he had some of those plays for Pearsall. The week before, Pearsall should have got a touchdown. Brock Purdy just didn't throw a corner route, and maybe his shoulder was bothering him. I don't know, because he missed a couple of those throws, those intermediate deep throws that he could have had, and maybe that's what it was. But there have been opportunities where he's open. So it's less on Pearsall and more on the quarterback at this point.
Where are you at with Nick Sorensen and Brian Schneider? The 49ers missed, I think, 15 tackles in the first half against Green Bay, the most in the NFL this season, if I remember right. I think that on the broadcast they said 10 in the first quarter which was the most this season in the NFL. That I just don't know where that comes from, because this team has been a really good tackling team. Now, there are a lot of players on this team who are here for the first time. And so is that part of it? Is because I tweeted at one point in the first quarter, this was early in the first quarter, something about how it's only the first quarter and Nick Sorensen looks like he's asleep. And I wasn't talking about his play calling. I was talking about how he looked on the sideline. He just looked like he was half there and half not there. I'm just not sure he has what it takes. Now, that may be unfair, but where are you at with him? Where are you at with Brian Schneider? I don't think that Kyle's going to make any changes in the season, but I would be surprised if either of them are back in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Now, when it comes to the tackling, that's kind of a tough thing for these coaches, because all they can do is teach hit and wrap. Nobody tackles to the ground at practice. The way the collective bargaining agreement comes, you can't have as many padded practices. Everyone's afraid of injuries. These guys don't tackle in practice once you start the regular season. That's tough. You throw in the fact that Josh Jacobs is a pretty physical runner and tough to bring down. That also adds to it, but it was not a great performance for the 49ers tackling, that's for sure. One thing I always talk about is space. It's tougher to tackle people in space. And right now, the 49ers defensive line is getting moved too much on the interior. When they get moved so much, it creates more space for linebackers who have to tackle, or safeties who have to tackle inside the box. Because if it's a tight hole for the running back to go through, there's not a lot of space for them to be able to juke left or right. If it's a huge hole, there is. And that's why we've seen Fred Warner get juked by Josh Jacobs in the hole. If the defensive tackle didn't get moved so far, Fred would have had a tackle in the hole. Those are the types of things that contribute to tackling. It's more nuance of the sport, but it is something that plays into it. Now, when it comes to Sorensen, I talked about my criticisms earlier. I think there's been some real personnel issue problems with the 49ers and some of the things that they're doing there. I think for the most part, he's done a pretty good job in some areas. I have questioned what he's done in trips bunch all season. He finally fixed that. That's good news. But why should it take this long, right? Those are the frustrating parts, especially with Brandon Staley helping, which means it must be something they thought was going to work. Red zone defense has been really bad this season, like really, really bad. And I know that it's a far cry from what we got from Steve Wilks. The only thing I can throw out there in Sorensen's defense, and I'm not trying to defend him, but this does play a big part, is Steve Wilks' defense had a healthy Talanoa Hufanga. It had a Tashawn Gibson, who's a very good player who creates turnovers a lot. It had Charvarius Ward the whole season, and a healthy Charvarius Ward. It had Drake Greenlaw. It had Eric Armstead. It had Javon Hargrave. Those are big losses, and your defense just can't possibly play that much better without them. I think that the tackling also, all those guys were great tacklers. Eric Armstead was one of the best tackling defensive tackles in the league. So all those things contribute. But Sorensen has plenty that he hasn't been good at. Third downs haven't been great. Red zone for sure hasn't been great. And I don't like his personnel groupings, especially when they should go dime. I think they're not coaching it up enough. So I do think there's things to be working on with him. When it comes to Snyder, I think that he could get fired at the end of the season. I do think there could be a change there. The 49ers might just have to go a different direction. The way that they've spent money on special teams players and the special teams hasn't really lived up to those expectations, it might be time for him to move on. Sorensen might get another year. I don't know. Kyle doesn't normally fire guys after 1 year. Steve Wilks was a rare occasion, so we'll see what happens there. But I do think Snyder might have run his course in San Francisco.
Well, we know that Kyle wanted Jeff Ulbrich, who is the interim coach of the New York Jets. And I mean, he's probably not going to retain that job. Would they hire a head coach and then move him back to their defensive coordinator? Seems unlikely. I would think that they would just clean house and let the new coach build his staff. So I think that there's a possibility he could go after Ulbrich again, but who knows? And I mean, Ulbrich did a good job last year, but he his defense wasn't playing very well this season before he took over for Robert Saleh. So I don't know if he's the answer or not. I liked him as a 49er when he was a player, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a great defensive coordinator. What I'm missing, and maybe this doesn't mean much, but to me, I miss that energy and that fire that Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans had. Steve Wilks didn't have it, but Wilks was tried and true. I mean, he had been around. He had success as a defensive coordinator. His defense last year was good. I mean, the fans were ripping him. People wanted him fired, but I don't know that he should have been fired. Sorensen, to me, I'm just not sure he's up to the task.
Yeah, I was not a big fire Steve Wilks guy, especially during the season. I thought that there were a couple plays here and there. You have those things happen that were egregious. You know what I mean? As a defensive coordinator, you can't do zero coverage in certain situations, things like that. But I like Steve Wilks. I thought he did a good job with the defense, especially using the guys that he had. I think where Steve Wilks had a little bit of problem compared to what Kyle Shanahan and that defensive player personnel are used to is he did change some things. He changed the philosophy things, the philosophical changes, including, really forcing everything in defensively. So he wanted to take care of the outside and force everything in. And the 49ers mantra since it's been Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans has been take away everything in the middle and force everything outside, make for long throws. You see it with the kind of the played off coverage right now. They allow the throws underneath. So I think that was a big difference for Steve Wilks compared to what you're seeing from Sorensen. Now, I don't know if Sorensen has it. I've seen some things that are really good. I think he stripped down this defense a little bit too much. I thought that they thought they were doing too much with Steve Wilks last year, and now maybe they're not doing enough. So he's got to find a happy medium, and so far he hasn't got there. He hasn't got to where DeMeco Ryans was, and I just don't think you're going to see the energy that you got. Number one, Saleh is just a crazy energetic guy. You're never going to get that. And then DeMeco played with that linebacker mentality and coached with that linebacker mentality. So he's a little bit different. But now look at DeMeco on the sidelines as a head coach. Stoic, barely makes any reaction because you have a different thought process. Offensive coordinator's got to stay extremely calm, and head coach's got to stay extremely calm. So it's not bad to be calm as long as you have an intensity and a fire when you talk to your players. And so I think Sorensen has that to a point because he's a former player that played safety. So that's going to be an interesting one. I think Sorensen is the interesting one. You brought up Jeff Ulbrich. I think Jeff Ulbrich would be a great defensive coordinator. And if the 49ers decided to go away from Nick Sorensen, Jeff Ulbrich would be a solid pick. His defense hasn't been good this year, but I think in the right scheme with the right players, it definitely could.
CJ Gray is in the chat. He says, so much discussion about coaching when you don't have the players on the field. And that has been an issue. They've missed a lot of players, some key starters, and even some of those key starters that have been playing haven't been playing their best this year. Josh is in the chat. He said, I'm late, forever faithful, even if we suck. All right, so let me move on here. Before I get to Buffalo, just real quick, the title of this show is Why Are the 49ers Struggling? If you had to sum it up, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, or if you want to come up with one thing for each area, why are the 49ers struggling? What is wrong this season?
I think it comes down to lack of execution. I think that they just haven't executed well enough on offense, defense, or special teams. I think that we saw last year that the execution was there, and maybe they executed a little bit better on 3 or 4 plays a game. And it may not seem like a lot, but those 3 or 4 plays could be an explosive. You think about big-time runs by Christian McCaffrey last season, and those things happened because everyone made their blocks. He would have hole shots. You think about some of the other plays that they were able to make on defense where they were able to get turnovers. And the turnovers have kind of slowed down to a halt. You look at this last game against the Packers, Jair Brown should have an interception, and Renardo Green should have an interception. They're just not making those plays right now. It's lack of execution in critical moments, and you're seeing it at all three phases. And some of that could be coaching. You could always say, hey, coaching, they're the ones who handle execution. But some of it could be, like you brought up, some of the inflection of new players. These guys are not used to making these plays. And you've got young players having to step in and make plays. The crazy thing with the 49ers, and the reason I go back to lack of execution at certain times is being their struggle, is if you look at their numbers, they basically are better than the Buffalo Bills in every single category. More yards on offense, more rushing yards per game, more passing yards per game on offense. They look at what they do in the red zone. It's pretty good. Now, the Bills are better in the red zone. That's the big one. They score more touchdowns. They score more points. That's where they win everything when it comes to that category. On defense, 49ers give up less pass yards per game than the Bills. They give up less rush yards per game than the Bills. Where do the Bills win? They win when it comes to turnovers. They create more turnovers, and they take care of the ball better than anyone else. Those are the factors that they win in. So you can find ways that the 49ers are losing, and a lot of it doesn't have to do with between the 40s when it comes to offense. And for the defense, it's completely what happens when a team gets in the red zone, and that's really why. And it's lack of execution. Last week, 3 turnovers for the 49ers offense, gave up 21 points on defense, but 2 of those were inside the red zone, one helped by a bad penalty inside the red zone, which I will argue to this day, Renardo Green did not create pass interference. That was a great play. Contact was initiated by Dobbs, so I don't like that call at all. But that's what happens when you turn over the football. Bill's really good at not turning over the football. Only 7 turnovers this season. Wow. Fantastic. So they're really good. They're a plus 14 team. That's going to be a tough one. But I think it's the execution's the problem for the Niners.
Josh asked, a realistic chance of beating Buffalo. I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm picking the Bills to win this game. It's probably no shock to anybody. But if Nick Bosa and Trent Williams and Brock Purdy play, I think they have a shot to win. If all 3 of those are out again, I think this is going to be ugly.
If Brock Purdy doesn't play, the 49ers cannot beat the Buffalo Bills. I think Josh Dobbs would give them the better chance than Brandon Allen, but even with Josh Dobbs, I just don't think it can happen. The pass rush of the Buffalo Bills with A.J. Epinesa, and the guys that they have out there, the interior guys like Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, I think that this offense won't be able to move the ball consistently. And so that's going to be a tough draw for Jalen Moore if he's playing in place of Trent Williams. I think that'll be really tough. So I think this one is definitely an uphill battle. I made this statement a couple times this week already. I do believe that this is the best team the San Francisco 49ers are playing this season. I think the Buffalo Bills are better than the Kansas City Chiefs, at least how they're playing right now. The Chiefs are always have the ability to turn it on, but Buffalo's rolling. They're coming off a bye. They're probably going to have Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid coming back. Those are going to be huge additions to the offense. They score 29 points per game. They're a dynamic offense. Joe Brady does a good job keeping them balanced. I don't know. This one's really tough. And, I think that a lot would have to go the way of the 49ers. So how exactly can the 49ers win? Well, first off, they have to actually win the turnover battle. This can't be even. This can't be, both teams turned it over once. No, Brock Purdy can't turn over the football. They have to make sure they win the turnover battle. That's number 1. Number 2, they can't allow Buffalo to get into the red zone, like at all. They're 63% of the time they're scoring touchdowns. 49ers give up touchdowns at 67%. Terrible.
Wow.
So you've got to keep them out of the red zone. That's going to be important. So guess what, Nick Sorensen? When they get around the 30, you better stop with the bend and don't break. You better be crazy aggressive getting after Josh Allen to put the onus on him. Don't let him in the red zone. That's another key factor. When it comes to things like third down, the 49ers are actually better than the Buffalo Bills on offense and defense on third down. So those are things the 49ers can win at. Long, sustained drives that you capitalize with touchdowns is the key for the 49ers. I just don't think they can do it without Brock, though.
Let me get to a couple of questions here. Marvin Rose asks, how many touchdowns have been called back by penalties? A whole lot. Yeah, I don't know that number, but I feel like a lot of big plays, not necessarily touchdowns, but big plays have been called back by penalties. And that's a problem. It's like this team is playing like a really young team, but the problem is they're not young.
Yeah, that's the truth. They're making mistakes at key moments, and that's that lack of execution. Part of the reason you're making mistakes is because you're not in the right position. Jake Brendel reaching out and grabbing someone and holding him and pulling him down because he didn't get his hips in the right position or get his lower body where it's supposed to be. You just see mental mistakes like that cause big time plays to be called back. Now, they're not all mistakes by the 49ers. Some of those are bad calls. We know that. But you make it worse and you compound the situation when you make those mistakes. Unforced errors have hurt the 49ers this season. You just look at this last game and there were some unforced errors and there were some bad calls. It kind of went both ways.
Here's an interesting one from Steve-O. He said Dobbs or Mason don't matter unless they can freaking tackle. 18th in penalties, but first in most points taken off the board. I didn't know that. That's that tells a pretty big story. 23rd in red zone D, 25th in third down D, 19 missed tackles and 2 dropped interceptions. Yeah, those dropped interceptions were killers for sure. Let's see. I thought I had another one up here. CJ Gray asked, should Fred sit out the rest of the season if he is hurt? We kind of talked about that earlier. Kind of depends on where they're at. If they still have a chance to make the postseason, he's not going to sit out. But if they reach a point where they're eliminated, I don't know if Fred's going to voluntarily sit out, but the coaches may sit him out, especially if that injury could potentially get worse and affect his 2025.
Yeah, decision's going to be made pretty soon. I think that, we talked about this earlier. The medical, they've talked to Fred. So if this thing could get worse, he wouldn't be playing right now. But the fact that they are playing him means they probably think that they can control this thing, and the pain is at least something he can withstand. Now, people that don't play football always want players to sit out. That's for sure. And anyone that cares about these guys, yeah, you don't want them playing. But the normal attitude of a player, I mean, Ronnie Lott cut off part of his finger, for God's sakes. I mean, this is what these guys do. They go out there and they battle and they play with casts and they play through injuries. And there's not a single player on the field in the NFL, not one, that is not injured in some sort of way right now. Everyone's dealing with something. And so at some point, they're going to decide that, oh, yeah, Fred's going to have to sit. If all of a sudden they're officially out of the playoff hunt, they will sit him for the rest of the year, get him to prepare for next year. But right now, every one of those guys are looking at the NFC West standings and saying, we still got a shot. We're not done with this thing yet. That's the competitor. And if you lose that competitiveness, the season's already over. Go ahead and go start fishing right now. So these guys aren't going to do that. But at some point, they'll shut Fred down if the playoffs are officially out of reach.
And that's why we're not giving up until they're completely eliminated, because we've seen it before that they've been able to turn things around. Yeah, that Lott thing was crazy. That guy used to hit people so hard he'd knock himself out. But we're not going to give up on him. Steve-O asked, how many Pro Bowlers are on this team right now? How many can you think of? Man, I think that Jordan Mason would have been, if not for his shoulder injury and McCaffrey coming back. I think that Mason definitely would have been. Trent Williams always is. I see no reason why he wouldn't be again. You think Dominic Pooney can make the Pro Bowl?
I don't think so now. I think that there was a push for it there for a little bit. I think that has kind of slowed down a little bit over the last couple of weeks. I think the 49ers, if they were, 9-2 right now, there would be a lot more players up for the Pro Bowl. But it definitely does help when your record is better and you're a good football team. So I don't think it'll be as many guys. I think that Brock Purdy's got an outside chance of making the Pro Bowl, especially if the 49ers don't make the playoffs. We know how guys will opt out, and that could be an opportunity for him to make the playoffs. But it's going to be tough. You're right. Trent Williams is probably a guy. I think Brock Purdy maybe. Outside chance for Jawan Jennings with how good he's played this season. George Kittle's a lock to make the Pro Bowl. It'd probably be all pro, first team all pro tight end. And then on defense, it's few and far between. I don't think Bosa's had a year where maybe he's a Pro Bowler. So we'll see. That Fred's probably a Pro Bowler no matter what. Fred's probably an all pro in my opinion, but Demo is on the cusp of a Pro Bowl, and then that's it. I don't think anyone else has a shot.
Yeah, I can't argue with
Juice.
that. Yeah, this has been his worst season, though. I mean,
but he's still like the second best fullback in the league.
That's because there's like two of them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're just going to keep believing. And, just like that Detroit NFC championship game when the halftime show was "Don't Stop Believing," and then they came back and won it all. We're going to keep believing that way, and we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll let us down here soon, but maybe they'll turn it around. Anything else you want to add before we take off here?
Yeah, everyone enjoy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys all have a good turkey day. Enjoy football. There's going to be a lot of good stuff going on. Thursday, Friday, they're having some college football games on. So it's going to be an exciting weekend, family, football, all that. And let's see what happens. Sunday night, who knows? Maybe the 49ers shock the world. They've never been more of an underdog in like the last few years that I can remember. So it's going to be a fun one. Josh Allen's a great player. It's going to be exciting. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, Josh Allen wasn't that who Kyle Shanahan was envisioning when he drafted Trey Lance? That's kind of what we've been led to believe, but we'll see. It's gonna be a fun game. Could be a snow game. That would be fun. I don't know. That probably wouldn't benefit the 49ers, so we probably should hope for sunshine, but I doubt there's going to be sunshine. And it sounds like it's going to be cold and windy, so we'll have to see how that works out. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. Hope that you have a great and blessed Thanksgiving with your family and friends. Have a good rest of your week and your weekend. Everybody stay safe.